If you're working alone, wear a mask.
I'm not afraid to be seen standing up to these guys.
The mask's not for you. It's to protect the people you care about. Count to 5, then throw.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and today I got the latest channel top 5 video for you. And today we're going to talk about the top 5 Batman comic stories of all time. And with me to name off his list is our good friend Corban. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, Wes. Happy to talk top 5 Batman. It's a lot of good stories, a lot to get into, so I'm ready.
It's a tough list to make, you know. It's like 100. There's probably like 100 classic Batman stories, and find 5 of them that are better than the rest is like, we're talking, apples and oranges here. Everyone's gonna have their own top 5, and I'm gonna name off my top 5 once you're done. We're not gonna get too in depth on them. Maybe we'll talk about 1 or 2 of them, but I'm really excited to learn about what your top 5 Batman stories are. What's your number 5, buddy?
All right, thank you. So number 5 for me, I actually chose Batman Nightfall.
Nice.
And just briefly run into that. It wasn't, a comic storyline in the 90s. For me, I loved the introduction of the character Azrael. I know as clunky as 90s as that costume was, the influence as far as the armored suit and everything was great. And you had the first villain who broke Batman mentally, physically, the whole 9 yards in Bane. And his introduction, the way that was done, was good. So that just off of influence alone was number 5 for me.
Yeah, Chuck Dixon is such a great Batman. He's not just Batman. It's Bat Family. He's just a great writer of anything set in Gotham. And I really like Nightfall. It's probably, maybe my second favorite, villain origin story after Arcade. I think Arcade's great, but the origin for Bane is just so intricate and well thought out and well developed. And they do such a great job, introducing that character. And I think there's a couple other writers on that one. They're slipping my mind right now because it's always kind of associate Chuck Dixon.
Oh, Chuck Dixon, Doug Moench. Yeah, you had a few.
There you go.
Kelly Jones and stuff, that were all in. It was a sprawling storyline for a while. And you had, I think it was Nightfall, Night Quest, Night Send.
Yeah, so
which one?
There's such a, I think that one lasted a couple years. It was like, that's a huge story arc. So, my favorite part of is right up into the point where he breaks his back. Then after that, I think it kind of goes downhill a little bit, but just that part, the introduction of Bane, and then all the way until when he finally breaks him, it's just classic Batman.
Oh yeah, for sure. I just loved it. I mean, it's funny, and I'm really going to touch really brief on this, but Night Quest, Azrael's run, I enjoyed, even though it was the most thin writing you'll find, the most one-note villains. But I liked the way that they took this Azrael, and it was like DC was trying to get their readers to kind of semi-buy into the fact that, hey, this could be a Batman, right? And so with each issue, he'd have to fight this group of cowboys, or this resuscitated Mr. Freeze who's confused, that kind of thing. And he would say, oh, this is how Bruce would do it, and this is how I'm doing it. And basically at the end of the issue, he would make another unnecessary modification to his costume. Oh, I need connected directly to the Batcave. Oh, I need extra gauntlets. Oh, I need flamethrowers. Like that sort of thing, which I enjoyed the progression of insanity that they gave Azrael. So while it was a horrible little middle stretch of that couple year run, I enjoyed that progression into Azrael being like a necessary Batman villain for that time.
It's definitely classic. What's your number 4?
All right, so number 4 is Batman Under the Red Hood. Big fan of that book. I loved the way that they took Jason Todd, brought him back into this great character that DC uses, one of its signature anti-heroes, right up there with the great ones of all time in comic history. But you had a little bit of a mystery there for a short period of time. You really had the development of Jason Todd in more ways as the Red Hood than when he was actually a Robin in this Batman universe. Illustrations were wonderful. The callbacks were great. And that final issue with basically Batman, Red Hood, and the Joker, as Red Hood's calling Batman out for, why won't you break your code just once over this monster who did this to me, and having Batman respond to that, I thought was very moving. And it made for a great comic. It made for a great animated movie. And what's funny about that, just a brief note, the guy who wrote the book, Judd Winnick, also was able to adapt that material into that animated movie. So you kind of had his influence all throughout, and some of those really strong, poignant notes from the book carried over. So all that entirely, it's just a great book.
Absolutely. Okay, what's your number 3 Batman story?
All right, number 3, Batman Venom. Really love that one. Kind of introduction of Venom before Bane. Batman failed to save a girl who was held hostage, and he's obsessed by that physical limitation. He's trying to find something to make him stronger, to make him better, to kind of compete so he can save more people. He comes across Venom, and it's a great storyline, and one that I think it pushed Batman's physical limits. And I love those stories that don't just push that boundary on that level, but also mentally. Like, Batman knows when he's taking these pills, this isn't natural, this isn't right. And as someone who has no superpowers, that's something he's constantly thinking about. But also his urge to do right and do more and do better comes into play there. It's kind of a hilarious story. I know one issue he's fighting a shark, callbacks to the 1960s Batman thing, but it was grounded pretty serious for its issue, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so it's one of the interesting things about Batman is a regular guy with the superhero's will and determination, but he's in a world full of superheroes, so you can definitely see how that would be attempted. Can I become more than myself? To where I can become equals, with all these people I'm working with. I personally haven't read Venom, but that's definitely going on the list. I'm going to put it on there. Going to check it out since it was on your top 3, buddy.
Oh, definitely. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a good one. Written by the great Dennis O'Neil, so
All right, what's your number 2?
All right, number 2 is Batman the Colts. This was written in 1988 by Jim Starlin, drawn by Bernie Wrightson, and it's basically detailing Batman's investigation and killing of some small-time crooks in Gotham. He gets kidnapped and held captive by a religious cult led by this mysterious man called Deacon Joseph Blackfire. And what's funny about it is that it really was the first one before Bane to break Batman. He's experiencing hallucinations. He's basically a witness in a couple of murders by this cult while he's held captive. But I also like that it's one of the only stories that put Jason Todd in an heroic light as he goes down into the cult, because Batman's missing for months to kind of save Batman, help him out. The imagery is amazing. Bernie Wrightson is a great horror artist, and so a lot of that imagery is very striking and very visceral. But I enjoyed that very much, and it really evoked those feelings of darkness that you get when you read a Batman comic, and that shadowiness. It's a dark book. A lot of the inspiration for it was definitely used in Batman: The Dark Knight Rises, that movie. And it may not be story-wise the greatest, but for me, when I think Batman, I think of those types of themes, and it was explored very well in Batman the Colts.
Nice. Okay, look, buddy, let's hear your number 1. There's so many comic stories to choose from. I know a lot of people think that there's a story by Frank Miller that's the greatest Batman story of all time. I don't know what your number 1 is.
Yeah.
Let me know.
You know what? It is by Frank Miller. It's Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. That is the quintessential Batman book, in my opinion. It is my favorite comic of all time. I have several copies of this book. I can't say enough about it. I mean, it's just a great book that I think personifies who Batman is entirely, and really remaking comics and Batman for the modern era. So that's number 1 always for me. Can't beat it.
He does a lot of interesting stuff with Batman, and the Robins. I think they're like eating rats, and he's doing some pretty crazy stuff. So, Frank really didn't hold back on that. And it's one of the, along with Watchmen, is that comic that really changed and redefined the industry. And some might say for worse, because in the hands of a lesser writer, a lesser creative mind, maybe they can't do that deconstruction or they can't recreate that correctly or apply it to the character well. But Frank Miller, with his Daredevil run, all of his work on Batman, it's his signature, move and something that it's going to stand the test of time forever.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, it's an amazing book.
All right, so what are your thoughts on the other Dark Knight Returns, like the Dark Knight Returns universe? Are you still on board?
So I am, okay, but just out of my loyalty to that original book, each one has gotten progressively worse, except I liked his little one-shot a couple years ago, Batman: The Dark Knight Returns: The Last Crusade, which was his attempt to kind of tell the death of Jason Todd. And we have to remember that he basically kind of killed Jason Todd off before it actually happened by 3 years, by 2 to 3 years, when Jim Starlin did in Death in the Family, where he basically, that was the inspiration for Batman to retire in that universe. But I enjoyed The Last Crusade. It was kind of a milquetoast type of book, but I thought it was okay. Aside from that, I mean, you're right. It took me a long time to finish Batman: The Dark Knight Strikes Again. The Dark Knight Master Race was not great. Now you have The Golden Child, and I was kind of confused by that too. So I think, Miller put his best stuff out first, and that was great. Mm-hmm. And then he continued to add. I mean, we forget the first book. I actually enjoyed this one a lot. The first little entry he did into the universe after The Dark Knight Returns, and I guess after year one, was Spawn Batman, that crossover with Todd McFarlane, which I think is just a gorgeous illustrated book, even though it is the first segue into I'm the goddamn Batman that Miller ends up using for like the rest of the run. But just out of the loyalty to that first book, I have to say I follow it. I can't tell you my level of enjoyment, however.
Well, it's a good thing we brought you on here for this Batman list. Of course, we're doing it because Batman 86 comes out on Wednesday. It's a new era for Batman. Tom King's off the title. So it's a good thing you're here because you know a lot more about Batman. You've read a lot more stories than I have. My list is much more boring. So here are my top 5. The Long Halloween, Year One, The Black Mirror, White Knight, and Nightfall.
Those fill the gaps between the two of us. We have a top 10 right there. That is awesome. Okay, that's cool. I mean, I have a question. Okay, so The Black Mirror. That was the kind of the one that kind of stood out to me. That was a good story, but wow, that's nice.
And so it's different. It's Dick Grayson as Batman, and I think Scott Snyder made it work. I think if there is a successor to Bruce Wayne in the cowl, it is Dick Grayson. It should be Dick Grayson or maybe Damian, but I think Damian might be too crazy for that. So I like the way they did it, and the Black Mirror is just an interesting like villain group, and they're kind of auctioning off like people and technology, and there's all kinds of weird stuff going on there. And in the art by Jock is striking. It's different, and it really fits the tone of the book. I think Scott Snyder might not be the greatest Batman writer of all time, but he's probably the best Batman writer of his generation. And I think the Black Mirror is probably my favorite. I know a lot of people would say Court of Owls, but
oh yeah, that was a close one. Oh, I got a little. That was the first one for me as well. When I thought Scott Snyder, The Court of Owls, because it was a great story. Wasn't my personal top 5, but it is up there on one of the greatest ones. Batman's had 80 years, like you said, a ton of great stories.
All right, thank you very much for joining me for this week's top 5 list. Got to name off the best Batman stories of all time. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.